Hey everyone, what's up? This is Dr. Charlie Johnson, physical therapist. In this video, I want to share with you 3 reasons you should not stretch your piriformis muscle and or sciatic nerve if you have some form of back, butt, and or leg pain, sciatica pain. So I feel it's useful to share this, my anti-stretching stance, if you will, especially in a world where everyone is recommending to stretch for these problems. So I go a little bit against the grain and I want to explain to you why. And for those of you new to my channel, again, my name is Dr. Charlie Johnson. I help people all around the world learn to fix themselves naturally using the mind and movement as medicine so that they don't need to rely on other people to fix them. And finally, before we jump into the reasons why you might want to sort of reconsider stretching, I recommend you check out my DIY diagnostic guide. You can click the link above. Basically lets you inside my head and helps you figure out exactly what the cause of your, again, back, butt, or sciatica problem could be. All right, so reason number 1, the first reason that you might not want to stretch, right, if you have some type of problem in the back, butt, or leg, Piriformis Syndrome, sciatica, things like that, is because it pokes the angry bear. So what I mean is that it physically continues to aggravate the problem, all right, and directly does so. So for example, imagine, right, if you had a bruise on your arm, and I don't know, maybe you have a child. So the child comes to you and says, hey, mommy, hey, daddy, like this bruise, it's killing me, right? And they're like doing this to it, right? You'd probably say like, hey, don't do that, right? And you would probably agree that maybe it's not the smartest thing to do and or doesn't promote the best sort of healing environment, right? So same thing comes to if you have a pain in the butt or anywhere for that matter, consider that it's a bruise just internally if you want to think of it like that, right? A scab, and if you continue to yank on it, push on it, pull on it, prod on it, smash it with different spiky balls and things like that, it's just going to potentially, re-aggravate the problem and, fuel the inflammatory response, okay? So physically, it pokes the angry bear directly. Hopefully that's very logical and makes a lot of sense, okay? Second thing, okay, as to how it pokes the angry bear is it also does it mentally or psychologically. So it just reinforces or fuels the pain you're experiencing with consistent attention and fear and worry and concern, right? You might be asking yourself every, 10 minutes, hour, right? Like, oh, I wonder if it still hurts. And so you kind of push on it either with your hand or you poke it or you stretch it or something like that if you're sitting at your desk and it starts to feel annoyed. And so when you start to ask those questions, right, these are all forms of preoccupation. And again, what you focus on expands. So first reason, again, is that it pokes the angry bear directly, either physically by you poking on it or pulling on it or stretching it, whatever. And 2, psychologically or mentally, right, by reinforcing it or fueling it with, some yucky attention, fear, worry, concern, and other preoccupying thoughts. The second reason that I am anti-stretching for the majority of these problems is that it reduces the blood supply to the area that's trying to heal, right? So think about the last time maybe you were watching TV or you were sitting on the ground playing a board game, right? And you were maybe with your legs out or you're twisted a little bit and, you started to get some twinkles in your foot or your foot started to fall asleep. What do, right? You move very quickly and you're like, you start whacking your foot on the ground and you get even more tingles, right? Well, what happened? Well, what happened is that you had some form of compression or prolonged stretch through the nervous system, and it reduced the blood supply sort of temporarily to the nerve. And, when that happens, your foot and your leg started to fall asleep. So hopefully that makes sense, right? And what's interesting is that research shows that as little as 8% stretch through the sciatic nerve can actually reduce blood supply, and 16% stretch cuts it off. So for example, if this is my sciatic nerve, or let's just say, piriformis muscle in this case, whatever, just because it's so intimately connected, right? It's going to be impossible to stretch the piriformis muscle, by the way, without pulling on the sciatic nerve, pretty much, okay? So that being said, all right, so you've got a nerve. If this is 100% stretch, right, and then this is 8%, and this is maybe 16%, right? And so there's very little stretch needed, especially when a nerve is already sensitive, to reduce the blood supply, and blood supply is very important for living and for healing, all right? So blood carries oxygen as well as nutrients to the tissue that's trying to heal, and if you cut off the blood supply, then you cut off the potential for that thing to heal. And finally, reason number 3 that I am sort of anti-stretching, if you will, when it comes to trying to fix these problems is this idea of true versus perceived tightness. So actual versus perceived tightness, if you want to think of it like that. So just realize that most tightness in the body is perceived. It's not real, all right? It's not actual. So our brains aren't perfect, right? And sometimes they make a mistake. So when things feel tight in your butt or in your leg, it's usually just a sensation of tightness, not actual or true tightness. So play that again if you need to hear that, all right? So if you want to understand more of what I mean, you can check out my other video here where I show you some different DIY tests that you can do to tell if your kind of hip or leg or buttock muscles are tight. So again, you can check that out above. I'm not going to go into it too much, but so in my experience, the tightness that you're feeling in your buttock or your leg is not usually actual tightness, it's perceived tightness, and it usually occurs for one of these three reasons. First things first, weakness. So when muscles are overworked, they may feel tight, but they're actually just fatigued. And stretching just continues to make the muscles weaker and weaker and less resilient, right? And less able to do what they were meant to do, which is contract and create stability within the system, right? So think about it. If you have a rubber band, I know, big rubber band, right? But if you have a rubber band and you just stretch this thing over and over and over and over, maybe you put it over top of something, right? And you hold it there for days, weeks, months, right? And then you take it off. What happens? It loses its form. It loses its function. It becomes floppy and it can no longer do what it was designed to do. Same thing, sort of, within the system, right? It's like a rubber band that's been stretched out too many times and can no longer hold things together. All right, so weakness is the first thing that causes sort of this sensation of tightness to be created within the system. So the second thing that causes this perceived tightness is pain and protection. So muscles in the area of pain or muscles that hurt can become guarded or overactive. So we know, for example, that folks who have back pain, so if I was to hurt your back right now, or you were to hurt your back right now, I'll let you do that, then what we would see is if we hooked up electrodes to their belly, right, we would actually see that just at rest, just when they're walking around trying to live their life, their core muscles are actually going to be more active than somebody who doesn't have back pain, right? I won't get too much into the core debate, but then if people who are in pain are already more guarded and protected and moving sort of more like planks, why are we telling them to do planks, right? They're already protected. All right, so at the end of the day, again, when we're in pain, we tend to try to protect ourselves. Pain is a great protector, and we do so by creating this artificial tension or tightness. So the third reason that tightness can be sort of created artificially within this area and make you feel as though you're really tight is due to stress. So stress and anxiety are a danger signal. Pain is just a danger signal as well, okay? So you can get this tightness in or about these areas, and it can actually be a manifestation of psychological and or emotional stress, all right? So you want to ask yourself if, to see if maybe this is the problem and the cause of the tightness. It's like, hey, did your symptoms begin in or about a time of stress or what I would call fight or flight, or when you were in maybe a high alert state? Now, a lot of people see this as, no, I was doing perfectly fine. It was actually a really great time in my life. I had a new baby. Well, having a new baby is stressful. How do I know? Because I have one of them, and I'm wondering if I should have a second one. All right, so that being said, right, good or bad stress, I'm not trying to differentiate between the two, right, but a period of stress. Maybe you just moved after college, or maybe you just had a big move just in life, right? You left your kids. Maybe your kids left you. Maybe you had a baby. Maybe something happened. Maybe somebody passed in your life. Maybe you switched careers, or you lost a job, or whatever, all right? So these are all different types of good and bad stressors in life. And if your symptoms start around that time, you want to ask yourself, hey, is it possible that some of these symptoms, right, are due to some psychological and or emotional stress? And that's why I feel so tight in this area. Something to consider. And one final thing, just an analogy to help you kind of understand this anti-stretching stance, is if we take you back to physics. I know everybody loves physics, right? But there's this idea of hey, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. I think it's Newton's third law. Hopefully I'm okay with that. But look, the idea is this. The more you stretch a rubber band, right, the more it wants to snap back, right? The more you pull on a muscle and you try to lengthen it, the more it resists and actually wants to tighten up. Again, is something to think about, okay? So if you're doing all this stretching, right, and it continues to kind of snap back, or it works temporarily, but then it comes back later, it's worse the next day, consider that, one of these three reasons is at play. Either you're reducing blood supply to the tissue and it feels good in the moment, right, but then symptoms come rushing back. You could simply just be poking the angry bear physically by what you're doing, or mentally by the attention you're feeding it, right? You could be stretching what you think is actual tightness, but it's not. It's just perceived tightness due to weakness, pain, and protection. Your body's saying, ooh, don't pull on me, and you're saying, it feels tight. You're getting faulty signals. You're making a mistake, and you're pulling on it anyway. You're bypassing that safety mechanism, right? And or some type of stress. All right, and again, for every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. Could you be pulling on something that's tight and you're actually creating more resistance, more friction to healing, right? And actually causing the body to guard more. Some things to think about. So hopefully this is helpful. Again, all this to say, in my experience, stretching is highly ineffective at alleviating piriformis, buttock pains, as well as sciatica pains, and lots of other pains, and in fact can make things worse. So look, if you want to try stretching, totally be my guest. But again, in a world where everyone is recommending to stretch, I wanted to let you in on why I recommend not to stretch in most instances. So again, hopefully this is useful. If you like this, hit the like button. Also, let me know your thoughts. Do you think I'm crazy? I'm going against the grain, right? Like Charlie, how dare he, right? He's going against what everybody else says, right? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts, as well as, look, if you want, other pieces of advice as it relates to solving your back, butt, or sciatica problem, you just feel like you're stuck, then I would absolutely love to help you out. Just subscribe for more like videos, start to watch that stuff, and you will see a bunch of free resources on my channel, as well as in the description below. Thanks so much, everyone. Till next time, chat soon.